Journey Through the Gate, your paranormal portal podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by the supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together. Sticking with the show. We are back, baby, and we are having a great time. Welcome to Ghostober. Here it is, and boy, do I have somebody for you. First off, I would like to invite in my co-host. You know him, you love him. It's Mr. Steve Stockton. Come in here, Steve.
Hey, Cisco, how are you doing today? Thanks for having me on with you.
Absolutely, man. I've missed it. It's been crazy, but we cannot get through.
It's been a minute since we've done one of these shows.
I know, babe. I know. And it's, it's October. We can't let October go without bringing back the journey. So let's journey through the gate. We have a fantastic guest tonight. Now, here's the thing. I haven't been recording shows, but I have been looking for fantastic guests for the listeners to talk to and learn about, and I found a good one tonight. This is it. He has started what I think is one of the best websites I have ever seen, according to the paranormal. What do I mean by that? He's a paranormal investigator, yes, and a historian, yes, and an enthusiast, yes, but he has combined all of those things into a fantastic website called ghostquest.net. What's different about this? It's just really cool. He's got videos on YouTube. He's got a YouTube channel. He also has all of that media together. Then he has a fantastic map of the United States. And wherever you click on that state, opens up to pages and tells all about the hauntings in that area, in that state, and gives you a chance to put stuff in there that you know about it. And I think it's going to be a great paranormal hotspot meeting place for Para-Unity. So without further ado, let him come in here and tell you about his books and everything else. Mr. Brian Weaver. Come on in, Brian. Welcome to this side of the gate.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's nice to meet you guys.
Oh, it's
Brian,
a pleasure.
Nice to meet you as well.
It's a pleasure. So tell us a little bit about this now. Tell us about you. How did you get started in all this?
Sure. All right. Well, that's kind of a long story, but here we go anyway. So, I want to say that I started off myself very skeptical, and I'm very much a skeptic when it comes to anything related to the paranormal. But, as time goes by, the more I think about it, the more it makes sense to me that, there's something else out there, and it just became really interesting to me. And so what gave me the idea to start my website was it started with some local places. I'm from New Hampshire. So, there's not much to do out here. So, a few friends and I back in our early 20s started becoming interested in possibly exploring different places. And when I went to look online, I found I was having a really difficult time finding the information. There were a few websites, but they were just vague, and I had to do a lot of the research myself anyway. And so really it started off as just kind of a way to compile all of this information into one spot in terms of the locations, real locations in your state, wherever you're from, that are allegedly haunted, that have historical elements to back up those claims. Those are primarily the ones that I write about, but pretty much my goal here is just to compile a huge resource for investigators of locations that they could potentially investigate, as well as, different things that people have found there, different historical information. I also can include GPS coordinates,
yes,
as well as addresses when that's possible. So it's a great resource that, if you're interested in, even if you just want to hear some interesting ghost stories and folklore, it's a great site to check out. But for those who are really interested in pursuing paranormal investigation, I think it's a really great tool.
That's fantastic. So that's the thing, and I don't know if you realize it from our end of it, being the fact that I do the things that I do, and podcast, and Steve is involved in a lot of different podcasts and his own channel. A lot of times we have these conversations, and we'll have somebody like coming out for an expo, say. Like, so I have friends who are in Pennsylvania that do paranormal investigation team there, and they're coming out to do a couple of days, but they'll do the expo, but before they go home, they'd love to have a place to check out if they can before they go back.
Yep.
And just 2 weeks ago, somebody asked me, well, I'm going to be in this area. What do you think? Is there anything that you know about? And I just dumbfounded because I didn't know. But with this case, you could look it up. I mean, I was on it this morning, and I just looked up, New Jersey. That's where I live. And I found stuff that was, less than a half a mile from me. I had no idea that, the inn in Point Pleasant was haunted. Or, there was, I knew about a lair, but I didn't know about the wall, the children's sanatorium or something. I went to school there, and I didn't know about it.
Right.
So, it's just really cool. You found things that, like, I'm living right here within a mile from some of these and haven't heard of, and I've been in this all my life.
Wow.
So that's kind of cool.
Wow.
And something
That's
else.
awesome to hear.
Oh, it is. It is. So now I can say, hey, look, check on ghostquest.net, put that area and see what pops up. The coordinates are there. Everything is their address. That's a super thing. Now, that's one way I think that, it's going to be great for paranormal investigators or people in town, or, hey, we're going on a vacation, you want to check this out or this. But because a lot of people are doing that these days, just checking things out.
Yeah.
But, not everybody's interested in going to, a paid haunted house attraction or something like that. They want to do something else. Yeah. So I think it's cool that you've also added in there a place where, if you have information about a place, if you have EVPs, if you have, pictures, if you want to tell a little bit of a story, you have a thing down there that the people can add to it, so it will grow with everybody's input. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's something I'm excited about, and that's what you were saying is finding these places. It's interesting because I grew up in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and some of the places I was completely surprised to find out about. It's like, oh, that bridge I drive over every day is haunted, or like, that the school I went to. And in a lot of cases, you'll find places that you've actually been to, and you go, oh, wow, yeah, that place was creepy, wasn't it?
Yeah, that is so cool. What do you think about this so far, Steve? Isn't it a fantastic idea?
It is. There's almost 5,000 locations on there. I've been looking at the map, and I wanted to ask you about that. Is that like open for people to add things? Like I noticed in my home state of Tennessee, had a lot of stuff listed, but I think the majority of them didn't have any additional information. Right. I've got stories about just about every one of those you've got listed in East Tennessee. I know exactly where it is on a map and can give you the coordinates. So is that something you're open to, is people kind of filling in the blank spots as they go?
Well, yes and no. So definitely. So let me start by saying that. So I've been working on GhostQuest.net it'll be 5 years in April. So about 4.5 years now. And that being said, I've been going in alphabetical order, and I haven't got to Tennessee yet. So I don't have any of that information. And so to answer your question, yes, I love it when people say, hey, I've been here and this is what happened and blah, blah, blah. That kind of stuff, I love to hear about it. But as far as when it comes to people submitting their own locations, there is somewhat of a vetting process that I do before I add a place to my site.
Makes sense.
For example, for example, one of the big issues that I had when going through all these places is some of the resources that I used, and I'm not going to name any names or anything like that, but they had a lot of, I guess you'd just call them urban legends. I mean, they're
Right.
just things, they had no basis in fact, stuff like that. And, you know, I try and be objective when I tell these stories, and you know, a lot of the locations that I could have added, I chose either not to, or another thing is that I try and really respect the privacy of people. So if these locations are now private residences, I
That makes
don't
sense.
always list them.
Right.
Yeah,
And you're trying to
because, you
keep up
know,
adhere to the integrity of the site as well.
right.
Right. That makes
Yes,
sense. It makes sense.
exactly.
It makes total sense. Well, that makes it more trustworthy even. But like Steve said, if you could
Yes.
go in behind and say, I have a story here, this is my story, they would also know it was
Mm.
coming from him, you know, and not so
Yes,
much you. And that makes a perfect amount of sense. Yeah.
And another thing is I do have a submission form on my site. You can either go to where it says contact us, or at the bottom of, you know, say you click on your home state of New Jersey and you go to the bottom, and there's a section where you can leave a comment. There's also a section, there's also a link there where you can click to email me if there's a location that I haven't listed and you'd like me to potentially add it to the site. Then I can start that vetting process if
Makes
I can
perfect
find,
sense.
you know, yeah, a physical location.
Right.
And in some cases, you know, I'll have to say, sorry, this doesn't quite make the cut. But
Right. But see,
either
then
way,
again,
it's-
it gives
it's
the site more
interesting.
integrity too. I mean, because
Right.
Steve and I know a lot about urban legends and things like that too, you know. And I mean,
Right.
even as far as like saying the Jersey Devil, which I've known you've
Yep.
done a video on your YouTube
Yes.
channel, and Steve and I have talked about it many a time. And
Mm.
you know, that's kind of an urban legend. Cross, you know, cross that gray area a little bit. And that, but that's
Yes.
interesting. I totally get that if somebody has a personal residence, you know, or something like that. I mean, like even Alaire at this time, Alaire State Park, which you wrote about, and I know the story as well. In fact, I went to school with one of the guys who was on what was it? I want to say not Haunting of, excuse me, but My Haunted Life or one of those shows. But it was a really
yeah.
nice show that did the whole idea of his father got a caretaker job there, and they were living there, and him and his brother
Okay.
went exploring and actually saw a lair crying at his wife's bed through the window, and he was so overtaken in the main house. And I just did a show. I'm an artisan too, and I just did a show with my whole tent set up right outside that main house the whole time, the whole day. And I'm like, oh my
wow.
God, I know. But see, that's just it. You know, that one's going to be hard because they're not going to let you investigate there. But it's great to hear the
Right.
stories about it because there's so much going on there.
Right.
But then again, you have a lot of locations on there where people can go and investigate a bridge or investigate a field or a cemetery or a place. And that's very cool. So there's a little bit of everything on there. Now tell us a little bit about the books.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the
Tell-
books.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I'm working on a few books. So what you know, my goal with these books is, you know, some people like having it in book form. So
Right.
essentially, what it's going to be is the concept is going to be my website. So right now, I'm working on finishing up my latest book, which is the Folklore and Haunted Locations Guide, Massachusetts.
Wow.
And so I plan to release one of these for every state, or depending on some states, there's not really a lot of places that I can add. So I'll be grouping them into regions. But so right now, so I have my Massachusetts one that I'm working on. My New York, my Haunted Locations Guide New York has already gone through the editing process, and that is getting finalized, and then I'm also going to be working on my haunted locations guide for Michigan. So I have 3 things I'm kind of working on right now.
Right.
But I'm really excited because I published a couple of ebooks, self-published, but this time I'm going to be working with a publisher, and I'm going to have access to an editor and a professional cover designer.
Nice.
And I'm really excited about it. It's just going to be a really great resource for investigators, and I think it'll make a good coffee table book too. It's just like good to strike up a conversation, or if you just like creepy, weird ghost stories that happen, where you live. It's kind of just. It's just a fascinating subject to me, and
it is.
I'm hoping a lot of other people will agree.
I think that's a great idea, Steve. What do you think about all that? I think it's neat as all get out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like the fact that he's working on several books at a time. I do the same thing. I've got 3 in progress right now, various stages of completion. And I like doing it that way because if I get stuck or if I just get tired of working on something, I've got something else I can go jump over while I'm working. And then you don't have that postpartum depression that you have sometimes with finishing a book.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely
what do I do now?
That makes
okay,
total sense.
Got to go work on this one. So I love that type of work ethic. That's awesome. But that's a monumental task.
It is.
Even doing it by region. I mean, like you look at something like David Paulides and his 411 series. That's up like 7 volumes now, and he's getting kind of into other countries and different themes.
Yeah, I'd love to branch out like that, definitely.
That's going to be great. And on the website, before I let you go and we start getting into some stories and stuff, on the website itself, you have little things you can click on to get to the books, to get to the videos, because you started doing YouTube videos on, like, say, I think it's the 5 famous monsters or something. What's the title of that?
Yep. Yes. So my ebook, it's actually an ebook that you can get for free by signing up for the newsletter on my website.
Okay.
It's called Top 5 American Monsters.
There you go.
And yeah, it's great. It's free. It's going to be on Amazon shortly. Once my publisher gets it up there, it's going to be $1. So,
that's great.
I think, if it were me, I'd just sign up for the newsletter because it's good. I just go into I talk about a few well-known cryptids that are native to North America. So I talk about the Wendigo. I talk about Sasquatch and a few other ones, including one. So I'm in Vermont now. So including one that is native to my home state, called the Lake Champlain Monster, or Champy, as he's known affectionately by Vermonters. It's basically our version of the Loch Ness Monster here in Vermont.
Wow. Have you ever heard of that one, Steve?
Yeah, I have. In fact, I was on a show not too long ago, and they were talking Loch Ness Monster and other lake monsters, and that was the one I brought up. There's also, I think, Ogopogo and a couple more like that. So, yeah, I love the stories of Champy.
Yeah, it's interesting because it goes back to Native American times, and I think even if I recall correctly, the first French explorers who explored Canada and the New England region in the 1600s reported seeing that, and I forget what his first name was, but they named the lake after the explorer. His last name was Champlain, but he, in his memoirs, recorded spotting Champy, and he described it as being a snake that was thick as a barrel. Wow. With a head like a horse. So, wow. I mean, written documentation of that sighting goes back hundreds of years, which is interesting. And then you have those YouTube videos where people see them. So,
wow. And you often
Yeah,
wonder, is that the same one, or is it, offspring
true.
of that first one? I mean, it's just,
Hmm.
and the same with Nessie, it's, you always
Right.
wonder that, is it the same one? And people think it can't
Yeah.
be, but then you've got sharks that have, lived
Right. Yep.
forever. I mean, it's just,
Hmm.
it gets crazy
Hmm.
when you start thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'm no, I am
It's.
in all of the things that I get really deep into. I don't know that much about cryptids. I know a little bit about some. And every time I
Mm-hmm.
hear of a new one, I'm like, oh man, this is just, we think we've investigated and we think that we know everything that is around us, but I don't think we have the tip of the iceberg, tell you the truth. I mean, just keep
That's
hearing all these
definitely true.
stories. Like Steve will bring up things like spring-heeled Jack and
Hmm.
things like this, and oh gosh. Yeah, it's just like what
Yeah.
what are we living with,
It's.
There's so many rabbit holes out there
Yes,
that you can pick
Mm,
the
to
dog
chase
man.
down, and then
definitely.
they're I'm seeing new stuff all the time. Like,
Hmm.
Mm.
several years ago, you rarely heard anything about Dogman, and now
It's
that's
true.
real popular.
Yep. Dogman's a
And
big
then
one.
recently, there's been Stickman and Flannel Man and all
Oh
these
my.
other,
Not heard of those ones.
yeah,
No.
the
Yeah.
Probably for the
podcasts,
best
but
though. I'll wait till tomorrow morning when it's not totally dark, and then I'll go on Reddit and
Yeah.
I'll read all of it.
Well, you think out in New Hampshire you'd have somebody like Flannel Man. It's cold out there.
Flannel man. Yeah,
Isn't that
that's
something?
true. Up here in Vermont, it is below freezing. It was below freezing last night.
That's crazy. I don't know how you guys do it.
Yep.
I have a niece out there in New
Yeah.
Hampshire. I'm like, I want no part of it. I really don't. But it's cold enough
Yeah.
in New Jersey. But that's amazing, and I'm glad. And I've watched the YouTube videos. I'm really liking them. I like the way you do them. So I highly recommend go on the channel. What is the name of the channel again? Is it Ghost Quest YouTube?
Let me
'Cause
check. It is YouTube. It actually has a bunch of numbers. But if
right.
you search Ghost Quest _ USA, that's the channel name.
Okay. What I will do for the listeners is I'm going to put all these links because you have great pictures on Tuber. You have
Awesome.
a Twitter account. You've got the Facebook
Mhm.
account. You've got, the website
Yep.
and everything. So we'll go ahead and put links to everything, make it real easy for the listeners to find, especially those
Awesome.
paranormal investigators and people that have
Mhm.
information about these different places, your hometown. Please submit it. I
Yeah,
think the vetting
definitely.
idea is a good idea because that means when you
Mhm.
get on there, you're getting good information. So
Mhm.
that's,
Sorry to interrupt
go
here.
ahead.
So when I'm talking about vetting here, you're welcome to go post on the comments. Hey, I think this place is haunted. That's absolutely fine. Anything that you want to discuss there, pictures that you want to post there, absolutely go ahead. It's just that certain things, if I put it on the site, it's gone through our vetting
Makes
and
perfect sense.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
because then,
but
we know if we're looking at it. I had no doubts when I looked at it the way you had it set up. I didn't doubt a thing that you put up there. Even the ones that like I
Good,
said, I'm
yeah.
living a half a mile away and I'm like, now I have to go have dinner
Mhm.
in this place because I had no idea.
Yeah.
I just
And
passed
some
it
of
2
them
days
sound
ago.
so absurd. It's
Right.
just like, can that be true? But
know.
I guarantee you, any date
cool.
name
Yeah.
that I put on the page
Has gone
I've
through.
found it and vetted it. So
Yeah, that's wonderful, and I think that makes it the whole site more trustworthy. I really do, and
Mhm.
like I said, I love the fact that you could go in and say, "Hey, yes, I was at the cemetery. I've got a picture. This is what happened there." I love how you
Mhm.
went through. I can't remember is it Whaley Sanatorium that you had on there? You had a bunch of stuff.
Waverly Hills.
Waverly
I
Hills.
think,
Okay,
maybe.
sanitarium.
Mhm.
There's so many now,
Yeah.
and then you had all the. I mean,
Right,
it's
yep.
really intricate. This website is very intricate, and that's one of the reasons I decided to have you on. I said, man, this guy's been working on this a long time, and I don't
Mhm.
understand why we don't have. I mean, everybody's got a
Hmm.
Facebook page or YouTube channel, and they're putting up their
Mhm.
information, and it's wonderful information. It's
Mhm.
the people I know and the people I follow. They might not get it all the time, but they have that one video where they've got the ball to roll
Mhm.
across the floor, or they got they're
Right.
just as, these people have
Yeah.
the same, if not more integrity than people that
Mhm.
are out there making money on TV doing, and
Definitely.
the evidence that I've seen with
Mm-hmm.
my own eyes, being in the room with these people that are doing it,
Mm.
it's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
People like KSPS from Keystone State Paranormal Society,
Mm-hmm.
Paranormal Elite, Paranormal Inc. I mean, just so many different people that I've gotten to know over the years, and I know their integrity, I know their heart, and if everybody could
Mm-hmm.
have a place to go and say, hey, we went here, we got this. They're loading their videos
Mm.
anyway. They're loading these EVPs anyway to their site.
Yep.
Put it
Mm-hmm.
on this one in one place where everybody's
Yeah.
got it. Because
Exactly.
what if,
I think that's going to be awesome
I know.
when that can all come together, you know?
how cool is that? And I mean, what if,
Mm.
this year, say, Paranormal Inc. or something goes and they get an EVP, but
Mm-hmm.
KSPS didn't see it. They went to the same place and they got, like, say, the same EVP or the same voice or the same type of
Right.
interaction. And now it's in
Yep.
one spot
Right.
under that
And
thing.
otherwise, you'd never know that because
This is
it's
what I'm
like I
saying.
follow a lot of
Me
paranormal
too.
people on YouTube, and one will investigate one place,
Right.
some good EVPs, good video, but it's like to be able to go to this location to
Mhm.
somewhere that and see all the evidence that everyone has compiled.
From that
that's
one
my
location.
goal.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
That's the part that just
Yeah.
makes my blood just start racing because I think that is so exciting. Because if we did
Yeah,
have
it
that,
is.
and I'm going to tell all my people,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell everybody, and I think everybody should, Steve should, everybody should go here and start doing that so we can really, bring this whole thing to
Definitely
life.
help.
Because,
Yes.
look at all the different paranormal societies that we follow or people that are just
Mm-hmm.
interested. Don't get to go on investigations much or whatever. I mean, I know people
Right.
all over the world, and so does Steve. We talk to them all,
Mm-hmm.
all the time. I was just talking to Ireland last night, and I had Scotland in the afternoon, and I had, and the
Wow.
thing is, how cool, if everybody can look and say, okay, well, these just say the Vasilla Axe murder house. Okay, and myself, I
that's
just
incredible.
wouldn't want to go there because I think it's just so tragic. If I was going there, I'd be going there to cross those kids. That's just me. But
Yeah.
ask Steve. I'd be sitting there. We'd be there all day. Listen.
Yeah.
But
You're not going to get the little axe keychain?
nope, I'm not buying the axe keychain, baby. But yeah, I'm not doing Ouija. I'm not doing none of that. I'm not sleeping on the couch. Nope. But nope. I mean, if I'm going with intent. Let's just say it.
That's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair.
No,
That's
I'm
just
not
me.
as much of an investigator anymore as I used to. I did a lot of that back in the 80s before everybody was doing it. I'm more of a legend tripper now. I
Yep.
like to just go
Right.
and visit the site.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like that vetting process because I've had that happen where I've gotten something either out of a book or online and then go to the place. You
Yeah.
can't find it. You can't find anybody that will admit to knowing anything about it.
Yeah.
And it's real frustrating.
Yes.
Now, in my first two books, those are just stories. That's stories that I heard. There's no way to really vet them. Some of the locations I've been to, but
Yeah.
those stories were told to me, and a lot of times
Still
by
good
people that have
stories,
already
though.
passed on.
Oh yeah.
It's a good story. You might or might not see anything there, but and I've had people ask me that, why don't you vet these? I'm like, well, it would be impossible for one thing because it was a one-time encounter.
Right.
But now my fourth book that I'm working on about the Smoky Mountains, I've been to every one of those locations.
Awesome.
I've been to the haunted hotels and been to the
Yeah.
places in the mountains where people have disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and that's a whole different ball game. And I
that's
like
gotta
the idea that people can read it for the stories, or if for the more adventures, it's a travel guide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a book that I loved back in the 70s
Mm-hmm.
called Weird America by Jim Brandon.
Yep. All right. I know I
Got
think
that
there's
book?
a series. Yeah. I think there's a series of books like that.
And
Wow.
his was like that, and it would say that in the beginning. This is what happened here. For the more adventures, it's a travel guide, but he gave caveats. Be forewarned. This community doesn't like to talk about this, or this is a private
Right.
residence or a private place. Ask for permission.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. That way, at least you know
Yep.
what you're going into. And
Right.
like he had little maps, and it showed the general area where it was. You could pin it down on an old road map. This was before
Mm-hmm.
Google Maps or anything like that. But it was just a lot of fun, and
Yep.
I'm trying to redo that in some of the stuff that I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going for with my book. It's like, on one hand, you look at an entry that I've made, and on one hand, it's an interesting story, and on the other hand, it does have the GPS coordinates and the address. So, it's definitely a travel guide, and paranormal tourism, I guess, is becoming quite an industry with people going to stay in a hotel just because it's haunted, and I think that's awesome. So I love covering places like that. I know in my home state of New Hampshire, in Concord, there's allegedly a haunted margaritas restaurant, which I just thought was really cool. Like, hey, maybe one night I can go out to eat there just for the sake of saying I've been,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there was a time when places didn't embrace that and wouldn't even talk about
True.
it. I've gone into places that I had all kinds of stories about, and they were just really reticent to talk about it. But now it seems it's like just the opposite of that. A lot of places are embracing their hauntedness, like the Martha Washington Inn in Abingdon, Virginia. Back in the 70s and 80s, they would basically want to throw you out if you came in there and started talking about ghosts.
Right,
but now
it's bad for business.
on their website. They have haunted tours that they give. They've embraced the paranormal.
Yeah, I love seeing places that do that, especially hotels and touristy museums and stuff like that, because it allows them to kind of tell a hidden aspect of history that you don't always hear about, kind of those weird nitty-gritty stories of just strange things and criminal behavior and just all kinds of interesting stuff you wouldn't normally hear about.
And then there's a lot of the bed and breakfast that are turning over into dead and breakfast. And
oh, that's a good one.
But it's true. I said that's what I'd love to do something like that. But then again, I'm just the kind of person that doesn't like to. When you get to know me a little bit better, you'll know that what I do.
Spend the night in the Lizzie Borden house and things like that. I visited it before some years ago, but it was just like a little tour and things in. But now I think they have like overnight stays there, and I think that's really cool too.
Yeah, actually, and it's good that you brought that up. That's actually one of so I picked a few ghost stories.
Oh, please.
To share with you guys some true ghost stories, if you will. And the first place that I actually have on my list is the Lizzie Borden House Bed and Breakfast, which is also a museum now, I guess. So I don't know if that was an intentional segue, but
Steve's good at this.
I mean, if it's okay with you guys,
please do.
I'd like to go ahead and tell that story. Now seems like a good time.
Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So I picked these stories for kind of a reason, and they all have something in common. And the thing that they kind of, the thing they have in common is that they both kind of represent a prominent archetype in folklore. So the first place that I wanted to talk about is the Lizzie Borden house. And so I'm guessing most of the people listening today have probably heard the story of Lizzie Borden. It was one of the most infamous cases, unsolved murder cases in American history, and it's one of those stories that everybody hears. So in 1892, the Andrew and Abby Borden were found dead in their home in Fall River, Massachusetts, and they were murdered very brutally. A lot of people suspected their daughter Lizzie of committing the murders. One thing, in my research that I found a little interesting is that Lizzie Borden was actually not initially seen as a suspect in the murders, but she gave several conflicting stories when she talked to the police, and that's how they eventually kind of started to focus in on her. And then, so, it's one of those locations that it's sensational for a lot of reasons. It's infamous, and there's just a buzz about it, and everybody's heard of it. And over the years, the rumors start to come out that, oh, something happened here. Maybe it's haunted. Who knows? And then in 1996, the location, the Lizzie Borden house, which is on 2nd Street in Fall River, Massachusetts, it was bought and opened as a tourist attraction, which had like a small museum, but they've since, they've expanded into a bed and breakfast, so you can actually stay in those rooms if that's your thing. I know for you, Cisco, it's probably not, but it seems like it. And I get where you're coming from, because it does seem a little disrespectful in certain lights. But so it's interesting that this place is being opened up to the paranormal tourism, and then. And I also wanted to get your guys' opinion on this one. What do you think made the Lizzie Borden house so famous? Because there's just so much hype around it in terms of the ghost stories and the mystery, the unsolved crime. Mm-hmm. And Steve, you said you've been there. I'm curious, did you see it, or did you experience anything?
I felt a heaviness there, and I didn't see anything or hear anything, but it was a different vibe. There was a weird energy there, and I've been places like that I didn't know the history of too, and just pick up on something. But I don't know. I didn't see or hear anything, but I felt a lot going on there, and I think it's just anywhere where you have that kind of senseless tragedy where people have lost their lives under violent circumstances have the propensity to do that, whether they do or not. And some places seem to fade over time, and some places either seem to retain it, if not get stronger. So I'm not sure wherein that difference lie. The best thing that happened to me on the trip, I bought a synthesizer at Pawn Shop. And I called it Lizzie because it's not Tom's.
Awesome.
I'm being facetious there, really.
Well, if you're asking me, if you ask me, you're going to get my opinion. This is my thing. As much as I've heard about it, and I've heard about it in my life, what's caused it, I think it's a perfect storm. It's, the unsolved crime. It's a woman doing it, which is unusual.
That was
for
that time, yes.
Right. Definitely. And then you've got all that underlying, the mystery before the murders. Why, I've heard there was, did you see locks on the outside of the bedroom doors, or has that been removed? Was that a legend or what, Steve? Did you see that? Because I heard there were locks on the outside of the girls' doors.
From what I remember, it was like the old skeleton key type doors, and those you could be locked from the outside.
That's true.
And that's why a lot of times they would leave a key on the inside, tied to the door handle with a piece of twine, because you could get locked in your own room if you didn't have a key.
Right. Yeah.
Or if they left the key in the door, people would try to slide a paper or something under the door and knock the key out and then pull it back under the door so they could let themselves out.
Yeah. Well, I think there was some kind of abuse going on in that house. I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but I really do think there was some abuse. I know the man was married before.
That I've heard that there was like some sort of incestuous something going on there.
But then again, if you have sexual abuse, you're going to have that.
It was like a quiet secret in the whole town. The whole town sort of knew and didn't do anything about it. Yeah. Because he was a wealthy businessman, banker, whatever he was there.
Overbearing.
And then after it all happened, they're like, well, we've got to make a show. We'll try her, but we'll make sure she's found not guilty.
Yeah. Maybe
that would make
a lot of
sense.
It's just a rumor, but that's kind of an Occam's razor theory for me.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I'm leaning.
Is a good term for it. Yep.
And some of the mediums and stuff that I know that have been in there that have tried to figure out what happened, they're also going to tell you that the spirits are just tired of being called back there. Even there's a little bit of that I don't know how deep you want to go on this, but if there was any kind of abuse of a child, usually when you have that kind of abuse, unfortunately, what comes with that are entities that enjoy that kind of suffering. So
Yes,
that
that's
comes
true.
upon it. So if Lizzie did it, was she acting on her own will? Was she just pushed over the, did somebody else do it? And she was just, the
Right.
nervousness and the
Hmm.
the the way she acted could have been just somebody who was an abused individual.
True.
And they
Yeah.
weren't looking at it back then. Back then, they'd lock you up for having vapors. If
Well,
you
it could have
passed
been
out or
one of those
epilepsy.
things where, maybe the father was strict and she wished him dead, and then when it happened, she felt guilty
Could be.
or something.
Yeah.
It could be anything.
Yeah.
If somebody
Yeah.
else had done it, I think about that. If I was in a home and somebody came in and murdered my family, I'd probably appear guilty because I'd be so nervous and so upset and
Right.
trying to remember where I was and what happened and in what order and this, that, and the other, that I could see an innocent person getting locked up. Cisco and I have even talked about that. We've had some strange dreams and things before, and it's almost psychic type stuff where, do I call somebody and say, I think I know where there's a body? Because if you don't do it anonymously, they're going to question you. You're
Yep.
going to become
That's
a person of interest. And we've
That's
known
absolutely
psychics
true.
Yeah.
that that's happened to, where they would call the police with a tip. The police would drag them in and hold them for questioning.
So there's a lot
and-
there in that
and
case. There's a lot
That's,
to think
that's
about.
a good point, and I mean, I can see why that would happen. That's interesting,
Yeah. And if it's, look, man, if
I
it
never
was
heard of
true,
that
But it's
before,
not good for the psychic
Yeah.
so much.
I mean,
Yeah,
I gotta say it.
definitely
If that
makes
man
sense.
abused those girls to the point where they felt like the only love they had was between the two of them, and then they had to feel guilty about that, and he ruled that family
Right.
that way, which was kind of the way back in the day. I
Yeah.
mean, just the average family back then we would find abusive because, the women were treated
Right.
in such a way, and that was just the way things were. But as far as,
Definitely
the sexual
true.
abuse and things like that since she was a child, and the bruising of her psyche like it was, I'm thinking, if he did
Yeah.
do that, what took her so long? I mean, I hate to be the advocate of violence,
Well,
but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
She snapped.
No,
She snapped.
I do know what you're saying.
If she did,
Yeah.
she snapped. And you can't really blame somebody for that. I mean, they were broken down over the years. If any of that's true,
Right.
and it could just be the
Right.
song that's made it famous. Because look, the song still exists today. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her. But think about it. Isn't that funny how little kids' songs? They're singing them on the playground. Maybe
How it
not so much
picked
today.
up on that and made it.
Yes.
Yeah, how did that start? That's a story all by itself.
Because
right
they were
there.
doing it in the town.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the trauma of this woman just trying? No wonder she locked herself up into that house. I mean, she couldn't even probably go to the grocery store without having kids playing hopscotch singing this song. I mean,
Right. Yeah,
her
that's
trauma
gotta be
never
weird.
ended.
And then I think that's a way a lot of people deal with a tragedy like that is humor.
Yeah.
I know, like after Ed Gein got caught for all he was guilty of there in Wisconsin, Ed Gein jokes were popular there for a while in the 50s.
But isn't it crazy? And these little
Interesting.
kids' songs like, Ring Around the Rosy, Pocket Full of Posies, Ashes,
Yep.
Ashes, We All Fall Down. It's about the plague.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a good one. That's
You
the
know?
first one that popped into my mind too.
Was it? Isn't it crazy though? So I don't know. Poor,
Mm-hmm.
Poor Lizzie. And if she is still
Yeah.
there, I think it's time people stop calling her and talking to her. But that's just
yeah.
me. There's enough torment. She was tormented in life,
Mm-hmm.
whether she did the crime or not, and now she's being tormented in death. And I hope they all find some peace. But that's just me because I
agree.
treat ghosts like people because they are. That's just me.
Yeah, I agree with that. So you think that that her spirits or the spirits of whoever is possibly there is being called back as a result of people investigating and asking questions and things like that?
I do. And I think that's
Yes.
internally possible. And I'll tell you what else can be possible because they can come back and visit and visit, And
Right.
I think her spirit is there in two different ways. I think it's fragmented, and I think the part of her see that can happen. Your soul, I might be using the wrong words, but I call it fragmentation of your soul, your energy,
Okay.
because you can
Mhm.
go through such trauma that you leave an energy in a place.
Right.
Such
Right.
as we've
Okay.
talked many a time about
Mhm.
right here in Asbury Park, New Jersey. There
Mhm.
was a young man who was homeless. This is within our lifetime here. This is just, I want to say 10, 15 years maybe. He
Mhm.
was homeless. A man who owned a antique store took him in, gave him a job. Very nice
Mhm.
old man. And
I
it
think
was
I've heard this
rumored that the
story.
man was a homosexual, which there's absolutely
Okay.
nothing wrong with that. But the young
Mhm.
man had this overburdened kind of, gosh, I hope he's not bringing me in for that. I hope this is just a job. There was that kind of
Right.
tension thing going on.
Mhm.
And I think the
Mhm.
man, the young man spent a lot of time working in the basement because that's where the guy needed the help with some carpentry.
Right.
And there was an
Mhm.
entity in the basement that was not
Mhm.
ever human that worked
Okay.
on this kid's weaknesses. His anger. He knew he was that kind of person that was just 2 ticks away from busting. And it
Right.
worked on that till the old man came down, brushed against him, and the kid took that as something and, I mean, beat him to death with a hammer.
Okay. I heard this story
Have you heard
maybe
this?
on a TV show, I
Yes,
think.
it got a little bit of, play that way on because it was on television.
There's some stories with
Yeah.
similar themes. If you've ever seen Midnight
True.
in the Garden of Good and Evil,
Same thing.
same type of circumstances,
Yeah.
but it's in New Orleans or somewhere in
Yeah.
Louisiana.
And people see
where
him and he's not
older
dead.
Man took a younger kid in and
Oh, yeah.
gave him guns and jewelry and things and kind of tried to warn him, and then the kid snaps and
Yeah.
I think under the influence of drugs and murders the guy, or the guy
Yeah.
murders the kid, I think was the way it was. But
Yeah.
tried to cover it up and rearrange things so it looked
Oh
like
yeah, it's an age-old story. But the
Yeah.
thing about this
Yeah,
that
it
makes it
sounds like
different
a very
is,
familiar story.
yeah, this
Like,
young
I
man
feel like
haunts
I've
this
heard that
place,
before.
and he's not dead.
Mhm.
Do you see what I'm
Mhm.
saying? People see him, and he's not dead. He left a fragmented part of his energy there,
Right.
enough
Right.
that
Joe and I have talked about that too, about thought forms.
Mhm.
Now, is that really Lizzie they're calling back? Or
Uh-huh.
is it all this curiosity and negative energy
yes,
that people are pouring in there?
yes,
Something's feeding on that and
Yes.
saying, no, you want a show? I'll give you a show. Hey,
There
I'm
you go.
Lizzie.
Right.
Yep.
And it's
Yeah.
like just something that's been
Mhm.
put there like a topo or a thought form. So
Exactly.
it's fascinating.
I think it's a
Yeah,
little of
that's
both.
definitely true.
I think it's a little of both, and I think that after a while, like I say, the Priscilla Axe murder house. If you think about it, this was 4 kids, a mom and a dad, that went to a church dinner or some kind of celebration, came home. The jerk waited in the attic, premeditated.
Yeah.
Think of the energy he left in that attic, just building up, waiting, because it
Right.
wasn't a couple hours. He was up there during the time they were at the thing, and then waited 4 hours for them all to be asleep, and then came in down and killed them all with an axe. And I think there was 2.
Yeah.
I think there was 2. I just have my suspicions, but
Could.
you know what I mean? To left the cigarette
I mean,
butts
they
up there.
never
No.
they never figured it out. So
Nope.
could
But
be
see, there's
anything.
those little kids in there, and they're intelligent haunting. It's not residual. They're reacting, and they're there. And the sad part about it is, so is he. At least one of the murderers is there too. Now, what are they going through
Yeah.
in death? It's not over.
Yeah.
That
That's-
infuriates me. It's like, let's look, 10 psychic mediums that are in there with really good, strong personalities. Hold that son of a gun back, get these kids out, and then send him to where he needs to go. That's how you know what I mean?
Right.
In a perfect world,
Yeah.
it's enough. It's enough for these poor kids. But that's just me. And Lizzie Bordenhouse makes me feel that way anytime I think about it. I probably couldn't walk in there because
Yeah.
I feel bad for the woman that was making the bed and got, axed to death. I don't know what kind of woman she was, but I don't think anybody deserves that unless you're attacking somebody,
Yeah.
And then to get your pictures taken laying on the couch that the guy got, I don't know. It's like, that's a little
Yeah.
creepy.
I mean, no wonder there's
No, I agree.
energy there.
It's a little creepy.
No matter what happened, it's a tragic
You bet it
event,
is.
and
Yeah.
those people at the end of the day, even though they might not have been the best people, they were still human
People.
beings. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, yeah. And real blood and all that. And see, that stuff gets me. I'm not far from here, and I'm going to tell you to get on your next ghost story. I know you've got wonderful ones, but I wanted to tell you too. The thing that breaks my heart is Tennant Church, which is not very far from here, which was part of the Battle of Monmouth in the Revolutionary War. With Molly Pitcher, and you hear about all that, George Washington, and the whole shebang. It was a bad battle there. It's right down the road from me. Well, you go into Tennant Church, and like Steve said, the heaviness, just the cumbersome heaviness. We're both empaths, so we pick up that in a diner, but on a battlefield, it's even worse.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Some places just have a weird vibe.
Yeah. But you go in there, honey, and the bloodstains are still on the pews in the church. And they won't go away.
Yeah, I think I wrote about that place.
Yeah, they won't go away
on my website. Yep.
No matter how much they scrub and sand, they come back.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to be
blood
forgotten.
Doesn't get out. It sticks to anything porous. So like wood and stone, it's very it's impossible to remove it from those.
And like I said, even if they sand it or whatever they do, it comes back, and it's just sad. And you can walk out and see the tombstone that poor guy was sitting on when the cannonball took him off and broke the tombstone. And I mean, things like that, they touch my heart, because I know somebody suffered there. Pretty much everywhere you're standing, somebody suffered, But then you think about somebody like Lizzie and her poor sister. And I don't even know about the wife
we've
before.
Talked about like that, Cisco's the house in Amityville where all that
exactly.
happened. There's just so many strange things with that. I mean, Butch DeFeo supposedly shotgunned the whole family.
Right.
I'm not buying it.
Started with the parents, I think, and the house isn't that big. Tell me the other kids didn't hear shotgun blasts.
I'm not buying it.
If they didn't try to flee or anything, they were all face down on the bed.
Right.
And there's
I think
been some
there was
conjecture
more involved.
that maybe the older sister helped him, and then he killed her too.
Or drugged them.
I don't know, something, or there was some kind of weird energy in there that kept him asleep while he did it.
Right.
And the Warrens investigated that after the Lutz family experienced all the things that happened there. But then the people that have lived there since don't report. They said their biggest nightmare is the people showing up in the front yard and taking pictures and trying to get in and sniping by and screaming at 3 a.m.
Do you know they even shut down the street?
Jarring.
Like Halloween, like right before Halloween, they closed the street that house is on. They've changed the face of it and everything else. Yeah.
I believe they changed the house number as well.
They did.
Yeah, changed the house number, changed those iconic windows that they
out.
used.
But who wants to live there? What are you doing?
And another one, Cisco, that I think was really awesome. The other day on my morning show, you told a story about the Morrow Castle, which was a passenger liner.
Yes.
That burned just offshore there.
Yes.
Within sight of the boardwalk.
1934.
In Asbury Park. And I'd never even heard that story.
Horrible.
So there were people that died on the boat, that drowned jumping in the water.
Yes.
That burned, that were maybe eaten by sharks, froze to death in the water.
Yes.
Or drowned trying to swim ashore.
Or third and fourth degree burns. No skin and laying there.
People on clinging to stuff could see the shore, but you just couldn't get there. You think about all that
energy,
pain, and tragedy, and everything that was going on so many different levels there. How could it not be haunted if such a thing exists? That's the perfect storm for it there.
Yeah, I know. It's wow. That's an interesting story. And where did you say that was? In New Jersey?
It was 1934. The Morrow. It's Morro Castle, and it was headed from Havana, Cuba, to New York. Very much like the Atlantic. The Titanic. Okay. Very much like the Titanic. Yeah. And the story goes that there was a radio man. I forget his name right now. I wasn't prepared, but I'll never remember names. But he had an issue. There was some kind of vendetta thing going on there, and he came out. He emerged from that very suspicious. Said he was like a pyromaniac. He liked to start fires. There was something going on, and they think he started it. He also survived that. He was in one of the first lifeboats out, and he started a store in Bayonne, New Jersey, and it wound up burning down under suspicious circumstances. So that didn't make it look any better for him. But I believe it was 135 people died in the fire. and or drowned and tried to jump off.
Mm.
And you think, well, why couldn't you jump off and land in the water? You'd be good to go. The height that you're jumping could crush your
height.
bones, you know?
Ugh.
And
And the way it was tilted up, that angle that it
Yes.
was canted at, it was like 45 degrees
Yeah.
or more. If you went
Yeah.
off the high end of that, you're talking 80 feet or more down to the water, and that's
Mhm.
going to be like hitting concrete
Yes.
at that.
yep, into the
Velocity.
cold Atlantic. It was in
And
September.
then that water, the Atlantic is icy. I know
Mhm.
that for a fact because
Yep.
I've
Yeah.
body surfed in it.
Mhm.
Even
There's
in the summer,
sharks.
it is.
Mhm.
There's sharks out there.
Yep.
The
It's-
impact, if it didn't break your back or your neck, could knock you
Well,
out.
the thing was, is it caught
Yep.
fire
And
so
then
quick.
hypothermia.
Right.
I mean,
Most of these
plenty of
people
ways
were
to die.
burned. And if you've ever had a burn, just imagine how much it
Mm.
hurts when you burn yourself on a candle or a cigarette or you bump into the stove, how much that hurts. Imagine that all over your body. And now you've jumped into the water, you're on fire, you jump in the water to put out the fire, you've got third-degree burns, and you're laying in icy
It-
salt water.
yeah,
That's
and
agony.
your body goes into shock.
Yeah, that
from
is agony you
huge
can't even think.
temperature change, I'm sure.
Right. Those people waited 4 to 5 hours to get
Mm.
out of that water, and it was 4 men. I mean, people were jumping into boats trying to do what they could do. It's 1934. They didn't have helicopters and things, you know. And these people were so
Yeah.
burned they couldn't hold on to the you know, what do you call those lifesaver rings? You know, they couldn't do
Right.
anything. It
What
was
was the
tragic.
story about the people that held the kid
Oh
up
yeah.
out of the water to get
That
him
one
to
crew
shore?
member jumped in the water because it was a young 10-year-old boy, and he was coming from Havana, and he was going to New York to be with his family, and they finally got enough money to send for him. This poor kid, he jumped in the water to put out the fire, completely covered, third-degree burns all over his body, and a crew member jumped in to try to help him and held that boy in that water for 4 hours till they got help.
Wow.
And that's how that boy died. And they took all the bodies, and there's Paramount Theater, which is a famous theater. It's been there since the beginning. Asbury Park still is. I've been to many concerts there. And they had a big, huge stage. And that's where they laid all the bodies for identification. And in Convention Hall, which is right there, and the whole Morro Castle kind of got stuck there on a sandbar right up against the pier where those those two buildings are, and the influx of people to come see it was so amazing back then. I mean, think about it. Think about the cars and stuff that they had in 34. They were coming
Yeah.
from New York and Pennsylvania and all over. They had to build new highways that we have right now. They are the reason we have the circles and stuff that we do, just for the traffic, for the inflow.
Did it destroy part of
Right.
the pier, or was the fire out by then? Or I don't
It
remember the
burned
entire
for
story.
a long time. I don't know that it destroyed part of the pier. I think it was just the way it was leaned and the way that it was in the water and on the sandbar, but it was right up against that. Yeah, it was rough.
So
But they
now
did
they hear
tours.
voices like in the water,
Yeah,
and not like people screaming and
Yes.
flailing in the water
Yes.
when there's nobody there. Then
Oh,
the
creepy.
Paramount's haunted, the convention hall.
Mm-hmm.
That one incident has basically haunted that whole area right there.
the beach.
And on the beach, they've seen people on the beach, and
I've personally
fascinating.
stood-
I'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
She told the story. I went and looked it up, read all this,
Yep.
researched.
I've
and said,
personally
"Wow, this
stood
is-
on that with
Gotta
my
go
hands
there."
on that bar looking out over the ocean and stood next to someone who looked like they were in a naval uniform from back then. Now, whether he was from that one or another one, because there's been so many shipwrecks, there's been so many people. You stand on any beach, how many people stood there before you? You know, I've stood there
Right.
and had a little
That's
boy. I heard a giggling and the sand move a little bit. And I looked to my right, and just out of the corner of my eye, I didn't want to turn my head the whole way, but just out of the corner of my eye, I see this little kid, and he looked like he was dressed from like the 1920s, you know, with the knickers, like the
Right.
wool knickers, little hat, bare feet,
Yep.
and just laughed and and gone, you know. So was he
And then
part
you
of it?
kind of tied that in
Hard
with
to say.
was it the Moonwreckers? I think you
The
called them,
Moonwreckers.
or
Have
the-
you ever heard of the Moonwreckers, Brian?
No.
And the
what
it's
is-
the wreckers or the moon cursors is what it was. In a lot of the
Okay.
beaches back in the day, you hear about these people. They were kind of land pirates, and what they would
Okay.
do was they would curse the moon because when the moon came out, it was too bright for them to get away with it. But on foggy nights and stormy nights, they would walk along the jetties and try to
Yeah.
lure in the ships that were bringing in over immigrants or people that had money, or starting a new life, you have everything with you, right? So they would actually get these ships to wreck on the jetties and or on the rocks. And then once the people started jumping off, if they were lucky enough to make it to the shore without dying or drowning, they would jump them and kill them and take their money and rifle through their clothes to get, because a lot of times they'd sew money in their seams of their clothes and stuff. So they would take all the seams out of their clothes and pull all the coin out of them and stuff, and then just leave them there or bury them on the beach. And I had a couple of friends. I didn't know this story, right? So I have a couple of friends that, after a bonfire or whatever, I can't tell you how many times I've slept on the beach when I was a teenager. I will never do it again. But they were woke up, and this guy felt like he was being mugged. And he rolls over on the blanket and looks, and he's got this guy's face in his face. And he kind of spoke like a pirate to him. He's just, and
creepy.
The way his sound was, his voice. And he's like, I'm just here to get, all you have or all you're worth, or something like that. And went to hit him and disappeared. And I mean, he could see through him. He could see the ocean waves breaking. And the guy was just panicked. And the guy just disappeared.
Wow.
They left everything they had on the beach. It's crazy. There's so many stories.
That was prevalent all up and down the Atlantic, cuts in on the Outer Banks. I've spent a lot of time there and heard those stories about how they would commandeer the lighthouse, put out the light, and then put a donkey up on a point of land somewhere with a lantern tied to it. So the ships would see the donkey with the light, think that's the lighthouse, go that way, and then hit a sandbar or a jetty and become stuck. Same thing. But there they would actually go out and plunder the ship and then either sink it or burn it to the water line.
Yep. Isn't that crazy?
Reminds me, that's right. That actually reminds me of a story. So this is another story that I was planning to tell you guys.
Come on, give it.
That reminds me, so there's a location in Marblehead, Massachusetts that I wrote about on my website, and it's going to be in my book that's coming up called Lovis Cove. It's in Marblehead, Massachusetts, and it's said to be haunted by the Screeching Lady of Lovis Cove.
Ooh.
And the story goes, it's a very similar story to what you guys were just saying, that during the late 1600s, the town of Marblehead was invaded by pirates at night, and they came to shore, and I guess they were taking people back to the ship to be sold into slavery after pillaging a lot of the wealth from people in the city. And I guess so this is the story. The woman, I wasn't able to find her name, but the story goes that she escaped from the pirate ship and she swam back to shore. Which, as you were saying, Steve, in the Atlantic, I mean, I used to vacation in Maine on Old Orchard Beach during the summer, and even in August, you spend more than 10 minutes in the water, and, your feet and your fingers are numb. Mm-hmm. So it's very cold. So she swam back to shore, and there were still, I guess, some buccaneers who were on the shore, and they captured her when she came to shore. And according to the legend, they stripped her of her valuables, and on her left hand she wore an emerald ring, which was a family heirloom. And when she swam back to shore, the coldness of the water, and this is at night as well, so I mean it's probably very cold, her hand became swollen and they couldn't get the ring off, so instead they just cut her hand off and they left her to die on the beach. And it's said that on certain nights people can see her apparition and hear her screams, her dying screams for help, as well as hearing the other sounds of, the other people who were killed on shore. So, when it comes to beaches, you have to think those are probably one of the most popular places for violence to occur back before, back in less civilized times, I guess.
Horrible. Horrible.
Yeah.
And that means that, see, that's just one of them. And you've narrowed it
Mm-hmm.
down to the point of, can you repeat that? Was it Lovis? Lovis?
Yep, that's correct. Lovis. Lovis.
So much. I mean, just think of how many stories have we heard about the Widow's Walk? Widow's Walk. That's what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
On a house that would be up where, the woman would be waiting for her husband or, her family or sons or whatever coming back from sea, and the ships that never returned. I mean, so much like the Edmund Fitzgerald. I mean, I can't tell you that song. Every time I hear it, just rips my heart out. They
also refer to that sometime as a captain's walk, because when they got too old and couldn't sail the ships anymore, they would get up there, pace back and forth looking at the ocean because they missed it so bad.
Oh,
I
see?
see.
And that's sad too. I mean, there's so much energy with that. When you start thinking that people put off an energy, like we've said tonight, so much of an energy that a young man could haunt an old antique store and be in jail at the same time and be alive, where Lizzie Borden could probably be haunting, the Lizzie Borden house and probably haunts her home too. I mean, I think that poor woman was imprisoned, before she even any of this started. I just feel like, and that happens to so many people. I mean, I heard a story last night about a young girl that's haunting a house because she was infirmed in some way. I don't know what it was. Is it mentally disabled? But who knows what that means? It could have been epileptic.
Right.
It could have meant she had, anything at that. In those years,
a learning disability or something,
and they stuck her in a little room with one window, no bigger than a closet I have now, and that's where she spent most of her life until she finally set fire to her door trying to get out, and the whole place was engulfed, and she died. She burned alive, and now she haunts a place. So
that sounds like a familiar story as well. Actually,
I think there's
that
so
was just
many.
so common back then. They're telling you about the story of my cousin and her husband. They inherited his great grandmother's house, and they found a secret room, like that little stairway that went up to a tiny little room with one window in it. And you couldn't really tell from the outside that there was an extra window until you really started noticing. And he went back through the family history and found out that there was, I think it was a daughter that was, quote unquote, an invalid. And they put her up there, and she would sit and stare out the window.
Wow.
And then Cisco, you got the thing there also in Asbury Park, the
Oh gosh,
was the solarium or the
makes me so sick. On the
I
Berkeley
can't think
Hotel,
of what it's
Berkeley.
called.
Berkeley
You know what I'm
Hotel.
talking about?
Yeah, Berkeley Hotel actually is right next to the Paramount Theater and Convention Hall that I told you about, the Morro Castle. In fact, you could probably see where the Morro Castle was from any floor on the Berkeley Hotel. That's how high the Berkeley Hotel is up. But as you're standing in front of this magnificent, Art Nouveau hotel that was built grandiose back in the day and still is today. Actually, Johnny Cash owned half of it, and he sometimes decides to haunt
Interesting.
that place. Yeah. And he had a room where you could look out over the ocean, and often he's seen there in the room. But above there, you look above it, and it's this big glass kind of, it's not a glass dome, but it's definitely a circular room on the top of it with glass all around. And you would think, as you're looking up, if you've never been in it, you would think looking up there, oh, what a wonderful, probably old tea room back in the 1800s, where you'd go have tea and look out because you could see ocean and town from any direction, And the tour guide had told me, he said, no, he said, that's actually very sad. What that was a room that the vacationers, when they came from New York and Pennsylvania, whatever, spend a week here to vacation, they would take their disabled family members or the mentally ill family members that they didn't want to bring down on the beach and all the shops and didn't want people to see them. They would send them there, and they would be locked in that room for a week. So they didn't have to think about them or deal with them on vacation. And there'd be one nurse, and there might be 50 to 75 people up there. Can you imagine how sad it was to look out through those windows and all the people having fun and eating ice cream and cotton candy and that's what you did. So I would set foot in that place.
That's
You know?
awful.
Yeah, there's going to be some bad energy there for sure.
Mm.
But you had
Yeah,
one
and
too.
it's interesting. I wonder if that's what a residual haunting is just that energy
Yes,
imprint.
I believe so. Yes,
Mm.
I really do.
That's what I think.
I do too. And I think that's the
Mm.
difference. And I think that's the one that blows my mind so much about the young man. And, I mean, I say young man because I'm trying to be kind. I don't know the man, but he did kill a
Yeah.
guy with a hammer. I mean, but
Right.
he's in jail. I mean, I don't know what he was going through. And if he was influenced by something more powerful than he was,
Right.
I mean, how many people in jail are locked up because of that? Yeah, you got to
Right.
think about
I've
it.
heard some stories that makes me think you don't have to be dead to haunt a place.
That's true.
What I've often told that was related to me about the man who went back to visit his childhood home,
Great story.
and the person that lived there said, did you ever have any ghosts or anything when you were here? And the guy was like, no, I just, childhood home. My dad built it, lived here until I was, in my teens. And the guy started describing this little boy that he would see either in the yard or running through the house. And he could never catch him, figure out where he was coming from or where he was going. He finally decided it's a ghost. And as he described the child that he had seen, the guy kind of had a moment, went home, got his photograph album, family photos from when he was a child, brought back a picture and showed it to the guy. And the guy's like, that's the kid I see running around here. And it was this man when he was a child. And he had loved that place so much. And it created such a trauma within him when he had to move from his childhood home as a teenager that he even considered suicide and things like that just because he missed that home so bad. So that impulse or energy or whatever he left there actually was able to take form and run around and be mischievous.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? And I can tell you probably a dozen more stories just like that. And that makes me wonder, am I haunting someplace? I mean, would you be aware of that? Think about
I've
it.
wondered
Probably
about that.
not,
I've thought about
by the
going back
sounds
to
of
my
it.
childhood home because I absolutely loved it and hated to move on.
Yeah.
I want to go back and take a picture. Of
I
myself.
mean, would
ever
you
seen
be
this kid
aware?
running around here?
If I'm running around as a little girl somewhere, like say when I saw that snot hag in the woods, did a piece of me get stuck there because that was so
It could
traumatic?
be.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
a crazy thought, but think about it. How would we know?
It is.
How
Another
many pieces?
thing.
Go ahead.
Another
Go ahead,
thing
Brian.
I've heard of is that's similar to that is something called a crisis apparition,
Ooh.
where I've heard stories of. I want to say the one that comes to mind first is I want to say I saw this on like the History Channel because they were doing a segment about Civil War and they just mentioned it as a story of something strange that happened to somebody, and then years later in my research I came to find out that was called a crisis apparition. But I guess what happened is it was during the Civil War, and I guess a man was fighting in a battle or something like that, and he was injured and wounded, and on the day he was wounded, his mother saw him appear in the house dressed in his uniform, and he told her that he was going to be okay and that he loved her or whatever, and she didn't understand, and I guess it was because he was injured or something like that. And there's just like a lot of different instances of things like that happening.
Absolutely.
Which could be like a trauma response to a traumatic situation or something like that.
And multiple cases of that happening when somebody is in a hospital and supposedly in a coma. And then you find out
Yes. Yep.
that apparition went and visited several different family members.
Right.
To
I have
say
a story
goodbye.
Heard a
of
lot
some
about
people
that.
that I know that had something contact them on a Ouija board claiming to be a guy in the hospital in a coma. He could hear what was going on, but he'd had a traumatic brain injury and didn't really know where he was or even necessarily who he
God
was
help us.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh,
And he
God.
was reaching out for help, and they were trying to ask these questions to find out if such a person really existed. And he could tell he was in a hospital because he could hear doctors and nurses and things, but due to the brain injury, he couldn't give him enough information to locate him. And I've always wondered if that were, true or just. It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that could be possible, because you think if the spirit can separate from the body after death, then possibly it could do that in life too.
Wow, yeah. What an interesting concept. And it also gives me the heebie-jeebies, because I just had a family member not too long ago that was in a coma. And I'll tell you, from the minute I stepped in that room to, the whole time I talked to him just because I knew he could hear me. There was not a doubt in my mind. And when he came out of it, he told me things I had whispered in his ear. He told me things that I read to him. I read him a book cover to cover twice. That's how long he was in there. And he told me pieces about it. And when he woke up, he was speaking things that had been said during the time he was being put back together. You know what I mean? So operated on. And he's repeating things that the nurses said and the doctors said. And I'm listening to him, And I'm not one of those people to go, no, that's not happening. Because when my grandfather, when I was a little girl, I was probably 5. And my grandfather was in the nursing home. And I can remember, now he had 4 daughters and 1 son. One of them was my mom. And you know how all the adults gather together in the waiting room and they're talking, or they're in the room and they're talking like the patient's not there. And they're so upset because when he's coming in and out of his consciousness, he's saying, he's talking to different people standing in the corner. And they're going, well, they're talking amongst them. The living is talking amongst themselves, saying, well, he's not long for this world because it's hit his brain. He's gone crazy. He's talking to people that aren't there. And I'm pulling on people's dresses and going, yeah, but they are. They are there. I see them. So, so many times people just poo-poo that stuff, and we should be paying more attention, I think. Because if you look at it, this is why. If you look at it in a different light, it's almost beautiful. Because there's people coming back to get them, people that they know, that meant something to them, and they're coming back to ease them over. And it's almost a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing. Yeah. And we're sitting there calling them crazy. You know what I mean?
Because death is kind of such a sad thing, but to think that there could be more, it gives you hope, especially when you've lost somebody,
absolutely, honey,
or whatever.
Absolutely. And isn't that really deep down inside? I honestly believe that for a lot of reasons, that's why we're all here. That's why we're all talking about this. That's why we're having podcasts and writing books and doing investigations and searching, because we all have that question: what's next? There's some seed
I absolutely
within
agree.
us,
and that's like the biggest thing for me is why I'm so fascinated in putting all this together with my website and all this. It's just it's something that, as a species, we're eventually going to figure out, just like we figured out gravity and we figured out all the other laws of physics. There's going to be something. We're going to figure it out eventually. And it's just such a fascinating, concept that there's this energy or there's something more than what we can see and what we can perceive. And I think a lot of that, science is really kind of starting to get interested in a lot of that. I've been reading a lot of articles that they've published about studying, like, what is, EMF? Can we sense it? All this stuff. And I think, as we learn more about, like, for example, string theory, where everything vibrates on a certain frequency and we just simply cannot perceive certain frequencies with our 5 senses, like our eyes only see a certain number of colors, whereas there are some fish that can see 17 extra frequencies of color that we can't even comprehend.
Fascinating.
So I mean, it's the same like ultraviolet light. You
Right.
can't see it, you can't detect that frequency, but it is there, and some creatures actually probably can see it.
Mm-hmm. Like dogs and cats and animals.
Right.
We always say, you know, I'd say pay attention to the dog, pay attention to the cat. I mean,
Yeah, and I think there's absolutely some scientific truth behind
Absolutely
that
there
that we
is.
just probably haven't looked at yet.
absolutely. And I'm all about it, man. I am all about it
Mhm.
because that's
Yep.
what I say when I go. I remember Steve and I are quite a bit older than you, I would imagine. And
Yep.
when we started
I'm
out with this,
31. I don't know about you
okay,
guys.
well we got you by quite a few. So when we
I'll be
started,
56 on Halloween. So yeah, I like to say I'm 21 with
Yeah, with a bullet.
35 years experience.
That's
right.
funny. But see, so when we started out in our lifetimes, we've watched it change. Now, Steve and I grew up in kind of a
Yeah.
similar situation where we were the youngest child of an older family. So we got to hang out with a lot of adults. Everybody was older than us. We were always taken to the adult things, in the
I like to
conversations.
say that by
Yeah.
the time I was 10, I'd been to more funerals than I had
Exactly.
kids' birthday parties, and
Same
that's the
thing.
truth.
So
Oh,
I
that's
got
no
to
fun.
ask a lot of people what was going on. I grew up in a haunted house. So I had a lot of questions, and my family wouldn't talk about it. So when I got to sit and, talk to people, there wasn't TV shows, there wasn't this. I mean,
Right.
I think I fell in love with Charles Dickens early because he actually wrote about ghosts and coming back with information and life lessons and morals and things, from back from the dead.
Right.
If you think about A Christmas Carol, that's what that's about.
That's actually a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. I
You're
mean,
right.
so those were my early things, and then it's going into schools. I go to the school library, I get ghost stories, and I want to read about this. I want to read about the occult, ism, the hidden
That was
stuff.
always one of my favorite things. Was I loved when I was a kid. I loved to read Goosebumps.
Oh, yeah,
and,
my son,
scary
too.
stories to tell in the dark.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Those are my son's favorite. Yeah.
Nowadays, we had absolutely zero.
Nothing.
stuff like that,
Nothing.
basically,
Nothing.
in
Yeah.
that realm for kids.
Nothing.
I remember getting
True.
Fate magazine when I was
Yes.
7, 8, 9 years old, little digest size
Yep.
back then, and just
That was
being
it.
absolutely thrilled with the stories, those sections, My Proof of Survival, My True Ghost Story,
Or Ripley's Believe
and
It or
then all
Not. We
these
had
wild
that.
ads in the back for witchcraft classes and hoodoo curios and all this. That was
True.
magic.
X-ray glasses,
Right.
yeah.
And then
still
TV,
is.
we had like In Search Of, and
Yep. Sightings.
that was really it. So sightings came later on.
Yep, it sure did.
But yeah, I grew up. I was basically a little old person because
Yep.
my parents were so much older. My brother was out of the house and gone by the time I had any cognizance. So all my
Right.
parents' friends were their age. Nobody had any kids my age. I'd sit and listen to the old people and then get them to tell me ghost stories or
Or
cryptid
things they had
stories or
seen, or the lore.
Yeah, it's better
any
than kid
encounters
stuff
or
anyway.
anything. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
But see, that's the way it is, and we watch it in our lifetime change. I mean, if you think about
Yeah.
it, 50 years is not that long. It's a half a century. So we've watched where people wouldn't talk about it, and if they had
Right,
a
it
haunted
was
hotel,
taboo.
they kept it hidden. And now it's flipped 180 degrees where they're advertising that now.
Yeah, exactly.
You
And,
know-
and that's such a cool change for
It
me
is.
to see, because it's like, how can we get to the bottom of this mystery when no one's even willing to talk about
100%.
it? Like, 20 years ago,
Yep.
it was no, ghosts aren't real.
And
no
now they're
Bigfoot,
like-
no aliens.
Yeah, they're around the water cooler in the morning in the office going, I had an orb go through my living room the other night. Should I call the
Yeah,
ghost
it's
hunters?
amazing. that
It's amazing.
experiencing
The
a new
difference.
Renaissance or Golden Age or whatever you want to call it. Because I
That's-
was actually doing investigations back in the 80s and up into the early 90s. Nobody was really doing that. You didn't hear anything about it. And
Yeah.
I was often ridiculed by my family and stuff. This was
Yes.
pre-internet.
Mhm.
There was a thing called Paranet, which was a series of bulletin board systems, the old style
Wow.
computer BBS, where you called in one caller at a time and left messages, and then when you hung up, somebody else could call in and read it. Well, they had networked these somehow into Paranet, and I wanted to be a part of that. And the local paper had done a story on me around Halloween about how I was trying to bring ghost hunting into the modern age, and talked about Paranet and stuff.
How cool is that?
And one of my sister-in-law's brothers. Oh, what do you do? Take the computer to the graveyard? Well, now people
Now
do.
they
You
do.
bet they do. You bet they
So
do.
I was way ahead of my time and just didn't know it.
How
Yes, and
crazy
you know
is
what?
that?
I'm gonna say there's been a ton of examples of people like that in history. Galileo saying that the Earth revolved around the sun.
Yep.
That was insanity in his day. But I think now that everyone is open minded to talk about it and to think about it and to ask those questions, then we can start to find the answers. And that's just really exciting to me, because that's like the biggest fascination for me anyway.
It's amazing, and
Yeah.
even if you have the question, like I've sat in there in a room and had a spirit come back and tell the people in the room things that nobody knew except them.
Mm.
And then you've got,
Mhm.
everybody's in there, you're convinced and you know it. I mean, I've had it personally hundreds of times.
Mm. Yeah.
And then you've
Wow.
got somebody who will say, well, that's just an
Yes.
entity that can read your mind, that's telling you stuff to trick you. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, why?
Uh-huh.
Why? To what avail? I'm not following it. I'm not falling for it. You know what I mean? It would have to. I have had spirits come back through mediums that told me stuff that I forgot. And when they told me, it hit me back in such a rush, like almost stuff that, like almost to the point where I suppressed it in my memory or just forgot it in my memory until they said it. And then all of a sudden I could remember being there and what I was wearing and what was happening when it happened. Do you know what I mean? Stuff that I forgot.
Yeah.
So if they're reading my mind,
Right.
they're digging in there deep.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah. And I mean, it's possible that, maybe the brain is like the rings of a tree and we can just read it somehow, in a way that
possible.
we can't comprehend. It's possible.
Possible.
Because you have like hypnotherapy, which is really kind of interesting to me, because, you can be made to remember things that your mind has repressed or that you've forgotten. So
Past life regression.
It's
can be-
all stored.
you
in
can
there
remember
somewhere.
lives you've had
It's just
before.
a matter of access.
yeah, right. Yeah,
Hidden files on a computer.
How crazy
exactly.
is that,
It's
though?
all there.
When you start getting through past life regression, if you believe in reincarnation, or you talk about these kids that are 3 years old and they're telling you the entire inside
Right.
of a B-52 bomber that they flew
Right.
in World War II and where they went and what it looked like and what they did and what their name was. And then you look back and that person existed.
Yeah, or like
Explain that.
I heard one story about a little girl or a little boy who said that they used to live like in a town somewhere far away, and that someone murdered them, and they were able to lead people back to where the body of that person they said
Whoa.
they were in the past life was.
Wow.
Just stuff like that. That's just mind blowing.
Right.
If it's a coincidence, then my goodness.
That's yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Or to to benefit that fact as well too is I have a friend who's a psychic, and she's there doing her daily stuff. I think she was working on a book about something cooking. It had nothing to do with anything that she was doing. She wasn't trying to exercise her ability, if you know what I mean. It wasn't an active thing for her. And this murdered girl kept showing up. Well, this happened. It happened to the point where she was trying to block it, trying to shut it down. She's going to pick up her kids, and she's in the back seat, that kind of thing. That thing where you look in the rearview mirror and she's back there.
Oh, geez.
Yes,
That's
stuff.
like something out of a movie.
It is.
Goodness.
It is. But this really happened, right? So it's
Yeah.
to the point, I mean, she's like saying, all right, it's 20, 25 times, this is happening. I mean, over and over and over again. This girl's not stopping. And she's communicating telepathically with her. She's telling her, you've got to stop this guy. Well, I'll speed the story up a little bit, but what happened was she kept pressing her to find the police officer that was on the cold case that she was murdered. They had got her from a car wash, one of those, to this day, I hate these car washes. I won't go alone because you're off your game. You know what I mean? When you're in these car washes, there's too many places they come and get you. When you're the outside car wash where you're doing it yourself in those tunnel things.
Oh.
She's in one of
I thought
those.
you were talking about the tunnel ones. In which case, I would tell you that I always lock my doors
Do
when
you?
I go through those.
I have, Brian, here's a little information. It's just
Yeah.
glass. You know what I'm saying?
But
People
it
lock
makes
their
me
doors. It's
feel
glass.
safe, and that's what's important.
Isn't that
is
funny,
I
though?
feel safe.
But
Well,
anyway,
yeah, those outdoor ones
Yeah.
like that, where it's just a bay.
yeah, that's where
They're
it was.
open on so many sides. Somebody can come up on your blind side and actually be hiding behind your
Yeah.
quarter panel or something, or under
I
your
highly
car,
recommend
even,
everybody
waiting to-
rethink going those
Right.
things
You're
alone.
very, very open and available.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's
Now
a
I'm never
quick
gonna feel
grab.
safe again.
It's
Thanks,
a quick
guys.
grab too because of the way it's shaped. You know, they just back up and go, and that's how they got her. And God bless her, they kept her alive on the highway for a long time, taking jumping in the back, raping her, driving while
Oh
they're
my
driving.
God.
They tortured this poor woman, and she wasn't caught in the revenge of it. She was caught because the guy was going to be released. He was in jail. He was going to be released, and he was going to do it again. That's what she came back for. Now, she told this psychic, you got to go to the police, you know. So she does that. She's sitting in there, like Steve mentioned earlier in the conversation. They interrogated this woman for 9 hours because she had information about that case she shouldn't have had. Okay, so
Yeah.
this psychic is sitting
Gosh.
in there in trouble.
Hmm.
She's dealing with it. She finally gets a hold of the police officer that had gotten the cold case. The original officer was off of it, the original team. And she said,
Yeah.
just do me a favor. Go in there. She's telling me there's something. She's being honest about it. She's telling me there's something in that evidence. You have the evidence to convict. Can you just please look? It's a pack of Marlboro cigarettes. He smoked half one and put it back. His DNA is on it. When she was killed, they
Wow.
didn't have DNA. The
Jeez.
police officer did it. And by golly,
Yeah.
if the DNA didn't match a guy that they had in jail that was fixing to get out in 2 weeks
Wow.
and he got convicted, they reopened the case and he got
Wow.
convicted on that. Of course, the police officer had
That
to say
is-
he was just going through a cold case. He couldn't say I had
Yeah.
a psychic and a dead woman that, you know,
Right, because
but they got him.
wow, but
They
that's
got 'em.
incredible. I mean,
And it makes
and-
you wonder why the dead woman picked that lady to go to. Like, I kept
Right.
having a dream about a dead biker that was just a skeleton
He sure did.
at this point. And I brought Cisco in on that. She got some psychics in on it, and we actually found out what the guy's story and stuff was. But that was my first, when I first contacted her, like, Cisco, I think I know where there's a body.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh,
But
God, here we
I
go.
didn't know there was a body's apparently long gone, or he was just
Yeah.
using that to
But this poor
Right.
guy
get
was
my
suffering.
attention.
Oh, he was suffering.
wow.
So, I mean, that's what I mean, Brian. I mean, it's if you think about it, this can be a horrible thing, or it can be, there's a lot of beauty and miracles in it, too. And I mean, Hans Holzer once said, and that's somebody, because we were talking about books early, you know, I can remember picking up my first Hans Holzer book when I was like 11, and I devoured them, and then I read them again, because he gave... His heart was more with the ghost that was suffering than the family that was hearing the banging. Because if you took care and helped the human being that was the ghost that was confused, and you helped
That's-
them through their issue, then the family problem would be fixed as well. And I loved the
Right.
way he did it. And now he's being brought back with the Holzer files and everything, and his daughter Alexandra is involved in it. And I think that's wonderful because he did such good works that way. But one of the quotes I've never forgotten, he said, I've never been afraid of a ghost. They're just people in need of help. And that's how I look
Yes.
at it. So that's
Right.
why when you said Lizzie Borden house, I'm like, you know, I'm going to go in there and cross them. Because,
Right.
because I think they're being tortured even now, you know. I mean, if you can
Right.
I have a friend too, she's a really famous medium. And she went into a really famous country club. I won't say the name. And they said, can you come in and see what's going on here? Because there's a tortured soul there of a woman and some black magic stuff going on, you know,
Yeah.
bad stuff. They say black magic, but it really sounded more like hoodoo to me, but that's just my thoughts. And
Okay.
they said, we want you to find out what's going on, but please don't cross anybody. Don't make them
Yep.
leave because we're making money on them. And
Yep,
she just
I've
said,
heard a similar story
she
about a
just
place
said,
that threatened
"Okay."
to sue a psychic if she crossed the spirit of it. They wanted some info on it, but they didn't want it to leave because, like you said, it was profitable. It was a draw.
Yeah.
I'll give you some
that's-
inside information
That's
on that
wrong
one,
on
though.
so many levels.
I'll give
I
you,
agree.
I'll
and,
give you some
know, it all
information.
comes
She
down
crossed them. She crossed her.
She did.
That's why I won't
Well-
say the name of the place. You bet she did. Good for her.
Yep. I won't ask. You don't have to tell.
Nope.
We'll just
We'll
call
get
it
it
a
from me.
happy ending.
But that poor girl got crossed that day. Just saying.
Mm.
I would have done it
Yeah,
too.
and that's something that I've always wondered about is, you know, places. Some spirits don't want to move on, and
That's
that's
free will.
understandable,
That's
I
free will.
suppose. I mean, it's. But you know, at the end of the day, what it comes down to, if you do believe in spirits, and you know, I myself have never encountered one, but it's about compassion and you know, acknowledging that if these are intelligent sentient beings, that you know, you should be respectful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to say, don't cross them. Who was that, Steve? Somebody said they will sue the medium if you cross. I'd like to see that court
Yeah, it
case.
was a story
And
that
who does
I
that
read
person
about,
think they are?
It was like a bed.
Oh,
and
I would have
breakfast
said,
or
sue me.
something that
Sue me.
they were writing a book about the place and wanted more information about the spirit. So they thought, oh, we'll bring a psychic in.
Oh,
And then
how
the
dare
psychic started telling them, you know, well, there's this, and this. I'm going to help her cross over. And they're like, don't you dare. I was like,
Ghosts aren't pets.
this is they wanted to do the whole dead and breakfast thing, you know,
Sure.
and they wanted an active ghost. That was their selling
That would have
point.
made a great ending to the book, though, is that
Yeah.
you help the spirit cross over.
Of
Exactly.
course.
But
So
It would have made a great ending to have that court case because I would have showed up in court. So you better believe I
Yep.
crossed
well,
them.
that's just like some
Get it
of
on the
these
books.
cases where we've talked about, Cisco, where there was something evil
Mhm.
in the house. And you'd have some of these exorcists, real life exorcists, come in and drive stuff out only for it
Yes,
to come
to bring
back
'em right
because
back.
the people there
Obsessed
actually
with it.
missed it and brought it back in, either through thought or
Wow.
actions or
Yes, absolutely true.
so
right.
that
Absolutely
can be a two-edged sword.
Absolutely true. Actually, there's another one too where the same medium that I was speaking of earlier tells a story about a man that was in an apartment and he just died there and was hanging out and didn't want to cross for all the top three reasons, you know, fear of what would happen when he did. He's ornery in life, you know, and had done some things and didn't want to atone to them and was afraid he might have to, that kind of thing, you know.
Sounds like my motorcycle guy.
Exactly. And so anyway, the single lady that lived there, she was terrified of him and terrified of the things he was doing. But she didn't realize that over time she had grown accustomed to his company in a way. As sad and sick as that sounds. And
Right.
when she crossed him, 2 weeks later, she was mourning his passing actually. Like he was somebody that she knew.
Right.
And she
That's
actually
understandable,
willed him to come
honestly.
back.
Mm.
And then he was really
Well-
angry.
Well, it makes you wonder, was
Yeah.
it him that came back or was it
Yeah.
some sort
Yeah.
of form that saw that
Right.
door open and walked in and
Yeah.
pretending to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
there's
Yes.
so many variables in there
Yeah.
that people really don't think about sometimes. I mean, there's some really evil stuff out there.
You
I
bet
think.
it is.
Mm.
In addition to people just needing help, there's
Yeah.
stuff looking for opportunity.
Hmm. And I want to say that I think, you know, a lot of people say this and mean different things by it, but the energy that you put out can attract
You bet.
that same kind of energy. So if, you know,
Absolutely.
if you're in a very negative mind state, like, you know, when we talked about Lizzie Borden and being abused and just being in that mind state of constant trauma, you know, that can attract spirits that love that sensation of trauma, or
Absolutely.
you know, spirits that feel that that's your weakness and they can manipulate it and things like that. There's so many stories,
Yes.
which leads you to wonder, you know, how much do we not see when it comes to those parts of the story?
Absolutely. And that's the thing when you're talking to people like Steve and I, we kind of understand that because I have been on the battlefield in Gettysburg and I can tell you there are entities there that feed off the ghosts that are stuck there in their loop and in their death state,
Yeah.
and they're
It was like
suffering,
the old
and they're
Green
suffering.
Eyes there at
Yep.
Chickamauga battlefield
Absolutely.
in Georgia. They had actually seen that creature while the war was going on, floating among the dead bodies, and then it's still seen there. So it was apparently drawn there
Yep.
with the death and destruction, and it's just stayed there since
Mhm.
since the Civil War.
Absolutely.
Makes
And you'll
a lot
hear
of
it now.
sense,
We're
honestly.
starting to hear it on some of the better shows. And I hate to say better shows, and I do say that with a pinch of salt, because anytime you got editing
Right.
and producing and you're trying to fit
Mm-hmm.
like a weeks of investigation and
Mm-hmm.
you know what it's like to have to investigate a historical site
Yeah.
and just research. I mean, all
Mm-hmm.
that packed into 40 minutes with, 20 minutes of commercials is hard to do. But there are
That's true.
some that are touching on things like soul collectors, soul reapers.
Oh yeah.
They're,
Yeah, I
they're,
love
they
hearing
are.
stories about those different entities, as you put it. Like, there's so many. There's like, what are the Black-Eyed Children, the Hat Man,
Yep.
the Soul Collectors, just all
Mhm.
those.
Yeah, and then to have
And I'm
people so
curious.
flippant about it,
Yeah,
they're
what?
told to leave. You need to get out of here because you're not going to
Mm,
escape this in death. It's waiting for you to die because it's going to,
mm,
take your soul. And you think
mm,
that that's so yours, but by the constant breaking down, the oppression, and then
mhm.
and everything else, it's weakening, as you go. And it's like,
Yeah.
what house is worth
And
that?
you have that going back centuries. I've looked into a
Yes.
lot of the Cherokee legends
Yes.
Mhm.
for my book
Yep.
on the Smokies, and
Mhm.
Cisco and I were talking about the Raven Mockers, and that was
Mhm.
an entity that they believed in. It was like they thought it was like a chief witch or a chief evil spirit that came
Interesting.
in when people were dying or near death to take
Mhm.
their souls and
Mhm.
keep them from going on somewhere. That's why it was so feared, because they
Mm.
didn't know what this entity was going to do with your soul other than
Right.
imprison it for, like put it in an aquarium and look at it, or put you
Mhm.
to work.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Right, and that's scary to think about because being put in an aquarium, that'd probably be like the least
Be
of your
like
worries.
sea
Like,
monkeys or something.
yeah, I'd be worried about like getting put to work or something.
Yeah, I mean, how horrible is
Seriously.
that, though? I mean, we think about our lives and we take them for granted. We know
That's
we
true.
think when we go to sleep, we're waking up the next day. All we're thinking about is,
Mm.
am I going to be on time to work? Is the alarm going to go off? Do I have enough coffee?
Yeah.
Whatever it is,
Hmm.
we get caught up in all that minuteness, and we don't think about the big stuff
Mm.
and
Yes.
the stuff that really matters. What are we here to do? Are we here to
Yeah.
learn? Are we here to just be cool to
Mm.
each other? I mean, is this it? What
And I've thought
what
about
is
that.
it?
I had that epiphany
Uh,
in a graveyard one time. I'm walking through there and I'm looking at all the dates and stuff, and I'm thinking, probably the majority of people in here didn't know they were going to die that day. They had plans. They were
Yep.
going to dinner.
Yeah.
They were going to movies. They were going on vacation next week.
Mhm.
They were
Mhm.
dreading going to work in the morning, or they were excited to get to work, or
Yeah.
Right.
and who knows what plans or what was going on, and then boom, gone. Now some people know they're sick,
Mm.
they're in the hospital. I think you
Yeah.
reach a point where you finally know you're close to the end,
Mhm.
but all that unfinished business and that
Yes.
energy
Yes.
that comes from that, where does that
Mm.
all go? Does that just dissipate, or does it gather? Can it
Yeah.
affect things in the future, other people that was near that? There's just so many. We've talked about this, Cisco. It's like peeling
It's a
back
good
the layers
question.
of an onion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peel back
Yeah.
one
Good
layer, there's
questions.
another layer, and then our
Mm.
good friend Soraya Ascath that does Where Did the Road Go? Have you ever heard his show?
So
I
good.
don't think so.
He's really, really good. He's more into
Mhm.
the arcane and esoteric stuff. I mean, he
Okay.
really knows his stuff. But he
Mm.
was talking about the paranormal. It's like a puzzle, and you
Mhm.
don't have a box with a picture on it, so you don't know where the piece goes. And
Right.
then it turns out maybe there's 5 puzzles dumped together, and then the pieces themselves have no pictures on them, and you've still got to try to
Yeah.
figure out what piece goes where and how
Yeah.
it's going to fit.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good
So
analogy.
it's a good analogy, I
And you
think.
don't
Yeah.
know, and the pieces that you do have, you can't even give concrete answers on them because either the pictures keep changing
Mm.
or the shapes keep changing and where they go. And it makes perfect
Right.
sense because the bullseye keeps moving on this one. Because the
Mhm.
minute you start thinking, okay, I it's just amazing. Like, I give this analogy of like a house.
Mm.
Okay, you've got the house and then you've got like some rattling around in the kitchen. Well, it turns out to be that ghost is actually there, and she's not
Mhm.
residual. She's intelligent, but she is seeing her house as it looked when she lived in it. She thinks she's
Mm.
still living in her time. She's still cooking
Right.
pies and things like that, waiting for her husband to come back from the field. Okay. And the people who are living there now, they're hearing all the rattling. They don't know what's going on. And they heard that, George died in 1923 or whatever when a tractor fell on him. He used to live here. So that must be George. So they every day say, George, cut it out. Stop doing all this, And they're not even talking to George, right? Then they see like some little girl ghost, right? And everyone, oh, she's so cute. Well, she must be the little girl who died of, scarlet fever in the 1800s up in the bedroom. Well, the thing is you get an investigation team in there. Now they've got good historic research. They've looked at the land. They've looked at the house. They have all the information I just told you, except they're not sure if that's the woman. They don't see her. They're just assuming it's George because the homeowner is just, oh, well, that's just George. He's our pet ghost, and he hangs out here. We make him a sandwich, leave an empty seat at the table for him, that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff's
Lucky
going on.
guy.
Yeah. And then when you get the investigation in there and the tech and the teams that are really trying with a solid heart and a solid mind, and then you bring in psychic mediums at the same time that bring the feeling to it and that extra sensory touch, and then they tell you, they break it down for you. Well, no, that's not George. That's George's wife or George's daughter that grew up here and became old and had a heart attack. She doesn't know she's dead. We'll take care of that. We'll talk to her. George is crossed. That's not George. He's gone. That little girl, not a little girl. You know what I'm saying? That's an entity that's pretending to be a little girl. Don't talk to her. We'll take care of that. So, I mean, you just never know because you're seeing glimpses of these puzzle pieces. And the whole thing could be stirred up because there's something on that land that's ancient that never was human.
Yeah, and that's a good point because, when I put all this stuff together for my website, this research, sometimes I wonder, it's like, how many times does that happen? And those stories are just kind of accepted.
Yeah.
When it really could be anything, and I wonder sometimes if knowing the facts, quote unquote facts, before you go to a location, does it help or does it hinder? Because on one hand, I see how if you possibly know who the ghost was, Cowboy Jack, and he loved to play cards or whatever, it can help you to prepare. But then again, how many times do you go in there with that deck of cards trying to talk to Cowboy Jack who never existed or something? It's like,
and that's just such a human thing, trying to make the pieces fit. You can connect the dots going backwards from anywhere. That's what I appreciate about shows like the Dead Files, where they do theirs separately. Steve goes in, he does his research. He's a cop. It's pure.
That's right. I do like that show.
Protocol. He goes to the library, he talks to witnesses, he talks to people that know the history and stuff. And then you have Amy that just walks in cold. And it'll match up a lot of times. That's just the amazing thing.
That is a really cool part of that
Cisco's
show.
friends with Amy.
She's the real deal.
And stuff that she makes. And out of all of them, she's the closest thing to the real deal that I've ever seen.
Yeah, I love Amy Allen. I think she's just got a great personality. Seems like she's a great person.
And she gives so much. And sometimes people don't realize that those breakdowns that they have at the end of the day, or like the reveal or whatever, those could go on 8-9 hours. And they break it up into those few minutes, and
it'll be
she
like,
might
we've
walk
got
that
this
place
cute
for 3
ghost
days.
that we love, and she's like, no, that cute ghost is an evil entity, and it's stealing your child's soul. You need to get out.
You need to get out of the house. But see, now
it's so interesting.
How scary is that when I tell people that? And I've stood there and I've talked to her, and we've talked about Vasilla Axe Murder House, and she said just how much that just tore her up because they won't let her go in there and just, But sometimes she'll go into a place and take the ghost home with her so she has time to talk to, because it's like therapy. You can't do it in 5 minutes. I've had ones that I've had to go back, with a team or, with people that I can work with to help me communicate and stuff. It's like therapy. I mean, how many crazy friends have you ever known that just have the same problem over and over and keep repeating the same thing over and over again, think it's going to be different, that are human, that you can speak to alive?
That's
Now imagine they're dead.
Dead and even more confused. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
always those people that do the same thing
Mm-hmm.
every time and expect different results. And
Right.
Somebody once said
Well,
that's the
definition
peak
of crazy.
insanity is when you do the same
Yes.
thing over and over and over and expect a different result
But
every time.
imagine if they've only
Mm.
got snippets and they're trying to make sense of what's going on, And I said that's another thing I liked Hans Holzer about, because if you've ever read his books or ever, listened to some of the studies he's done, he took a trance medium. He didn't play. He did the research, he did all the stuff. He took a trance medium in there that he trusted, that was blind, didn't know where they were going, and then talk to the spirit. And he would be like, tell him, do you know that you've gone? You've passed on now, And the spirit is saying stuff like, my body smells so bad. Why did they take my body out of here? It's horrible. Well, honey, you died. You no longer have to be linked to this pain and this suffering, because if you
Right.
get caught in that, then you're caught in that loop thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard, and that's why I hate it, when they go in there, just bang on the table, and then they get it and then they run off, and I'm
Yeah.
like, that you just used up all his energy. How long is it going to take them to get that energy back now? Because they have to draw energy, which is why batteries die, and
Right.
things like that
Right.
happen. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just help them. Just help them. And if it
Yeah.
is something bad, get rid of it. Find out why it's drawn there, why it's taking over. But if that's the
Yeah.
place, I'm Native American.
Yeah, and that's what I'm always interested to know is the why and the how
Right.
and the who,
Yeah, there's Native American names all over, I'm sure, where you live too. Like you
Oh,
go down
yeah.
the street and the lake and everything. Well, there's Native American places, and the names are, I'm not going to tell one for sure. I'll just make it up to give you an idea. But, say like Wanamasa. Well, that's so nice. What does it mean? Crazy people going to live in the devil's den. Don't live there on that,
Yeah.
or dead. What was the name of that one place? Steve?
Oh, there's a place
it was
out
like-
here in Washington called Yakult, Washington. And I knew I'd never heard the place, didn't know anything about it. But the first time I went into the tiny little city limits here, it's not even a city, it's more just like a little village. It felt off. It felt weird. I knew something was wrong. I didn't even have cell reception. When I got back within range, I looked it up, and it's, I can't remember the tribe, but it's their word for Valley of the Fire Demon. And they've had all these mysterious fires there. There's a bunch of children disappeared at one time.
Yeah.
Sort
Natives
of a la
knew.
the Pied Piper.
Uh-huh.
So they hear ghost children. There's a phantom train that they have there that they see on the old unused rail line that runs through the middle of town.
Right.
It's
Just
bad
all
ground.
kinds of things there.
Bad ground is
Yeah.
evil ground, and
That
people wouldn't
reminds
go in there.
me, sorry to interrupt
No,
you.
go
So
ahead.
that reminds me of an area in Massachusetts called the Bridgewater Triangle. I don't know. Maybe you
Oh,
guys
cool.
have heard
Yeah,
about
I've
that.
heard about that.
Yeah, so I guess the southeastern area of Massachusetts, I'm writing about this in my book a little bit. And actually, unfortunately, it was not one of the stories I intended to share. So I don't have all that information in front of me right now. But from what I understand, a lot of it's almost like the Bermuda Triangle of Massachusetts is how it was described to me.
Wow.
And I guess the center of the Bridgewater Triangle is this area called the Hockomock Swamp, which was a Native American sacred ground. And I believe the translation of it is something to the effect of the swamp where the spirits go, or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And they have always regarded it as a place of immense spiritual energy. There's places there that are people consider to be like vortexes of spiritual energy and just all kinds of crazy stuff, like phantom trains, ghosts, UFO sightings,
Wow.
Bigfoot, anything, everything you can imagine happens
It's
there.
a state forest that I've read about
Yes.
there that reminds me a lot of the Pine Barrens.
Yep.
It's supposedly full of mob bodies,
Oh, yep. I
disposal,
wrote about that one, but
Satanists, all this weird stuff in the woods.
Yes,
It's my
yeah,
backyard,
I can't
Steve.
remember the name of it, but I do remember that. I wrote about that in my book. Yep.
Yep. I live in the Pine
Yeah,
Barrens.
people. Oh, oh, yeah, that's right. You told me that when we talked before.
Yep.
So, do you believe in the Jersey Devil then?
Yeah, I was married to him once.
Oh, neat.
We're
Wow.
divorced
Does he
now, so it's okay. But no,
still paying
I
him
digress.
alimony?
No, but see, that's just it. You know, because I'm one of those people that I'm like, okay, do I believe all of it? No. Do I believe it's possible? Yeah.
Mm.
Because this is why. Because in every legend, there's a
Mhm.
seed of truth. So
Yes,
what part of
yes.
it's true? What part of
Mhm.
it's true? Is it,
And I just
Right.
you know, I mean,
I
do
just
I
pulled
believe
up some
that woman
information
had that?
about that. Yeah, it's the
13th baby?
Freetown Fall River State Forest.
Say it again, Steve.
Okay.
Say it again.
Freetown Fall River State Forest.
Okay.
It's kind of like their version of it. And then it mentions that there's a Native American curse on the land too.
See, I don't go
among
around stuff
the-
like that.
I'm not even going to try to pronounce the tribe name, Wampanoag,
Mhm.
Wampanoag people.
Yeah.
Apparently there was a wampum belt that was lost, and
Ooh.
that's what.
Well, see, that's it. You think of everything that they went through. You know, I mean, I'm speaking from Lenape and Cherokee ideals here.
Mhm.
You know, I'm a little bit
Mhm.
Scottish too, but I
a
tend to lean toward the
Cherokee
native.
myself.
Yeah, the native. You know, and we just don't mess with certain stuff. I'd be sitting
Right.
there with an elder, you know, and you got all these people wanting to know all these stories. Oh, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And we don't speak of those because when you speak
Right.
about
you can't
them,
talk about it.
when you speak of them, they hear you.
You
You know.
attract
Yeah,
that
you
So,
Yes,
energy.
and if
like
you keep, and then I had
the
this elder
Wendigo
look
and
look
the
at this guy.
Wendigo.
and all that. Yeah.
I mean, he
I
looked
always
right
get
at.
creeped out
Go
when
ahead.
I watch videos late at night on YouTube. I love looking stuff like that up
Right.
before I go to bed because I'm just a little bit masochistic like that. But like I'll be looking that up and they'll be like, "Oh, you can't talk about it or it'll come get you," and that's like the scariest part for me.
Yeah. Well, see, that's just it. You know, if we're talking about energy and frequencies, right? And you can talk about, we can very calmly speak about a ghost that maybe stayed, I don't want to say dormant, but let's say quiet for a while because one family moved there. We've never seen anything. And then the next family moves in and that there's one person in that family that ghost might connect to, their energy, because they're
Right.
suffering the same things or going through the same type of similarities, whether it's feelings, energies, things in life,
On
you
the
know.
same wavelength.
Yeah, same wavelength, and they connect, so they can connect into that energy, just
Right.
through feeling and thought process, and that energy that they put off and their light, whatever it might be. Then how can we, in our common sense mind, think that an entity that's not human couldn't do that?
Right.
So you can't.
Right. And sorry to
No, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
one that's been around ancient, that's got the ability and the learned process of the whole thing. You know,
And
you
hear
can't
somebody
can't believe
talking
both.
about it or thinking about, oh, I'm being called.
You can't. Yes.
I had a Black-Eyed Kids encounter back in the 90s.
Oh,
Sure did.
wow.
And to this day, I don't like talking about it because if I tell
I was
more
just
than
gonna
just a
ask you
very
to tell me the
brief,
story.
short
Tell
story
him,
of it,
Steve.
Yeah.
Well, guys, this is going to be fantastic. We are going to do a two-parter, and we're going to hear Steve tell his story about the Black-Eyed Kids and find out what Brian Weaver thinks about it. We've got a whole nother hour. We decided to go ahead and make this a two-part episode to welcome back Journey Through the Gate, to welcome back our little mascot, Crispy. And I cannot tell you guys how much I've missed you. Thank you for sticking with me through 4 family emergencies that kind of overlapped each other, so I had to be elsewhere, and I appreciate you guys hanging in there. But we want to celebrate Ghost-tober with you and get all this good information in, and I cannot tell you how much I missed you guys, and I hope you missed Crispy and I too, and Steve. We have some great guests lined up. We're going to try to do at least 2 episodes a month. We're going to try to stick to that. And also, we have some great announcements. We still have all the T-shirts and everything, mugs. We're getting new stuff put out. That's the way you can support the show. We have a new YouTube channel. It is Journey Through the Gate Paranormal Portal Podcast YouTube. It's hard to find, shadow banned, because I did some conspiracy shows, so shame on YouTube, but hey, you know, there it is. Just click the link at the bottom, subscribe, please. Like some of the videos, comment. That's really going to help the YouTube channel out. As you know, we were on Conflict Radio, which went defunct. Pretty much no warning, and then bam, you know, we lost our YouTube presence. So we've started it up again. Like it, share it, get the word out. I'm not trying to do the monetizing thing, but I do want you guys to have all the access you want. We are, again, going to be on all the podcast channels. We're working on some other stuff. I want to tell you, too, to look into the Zombified channel. Steve is doing the Morning Horde there on Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays. That's all live. I believe most of the time it starts around 1 o'clock, runs to about 2:30. If you know, nice for lunch, you know, depending on where you are, East Coast, West Coast, whatever, different time zones. So, you know, you can always catch it. That is on their live YouTube channel. We appreciate them. Check out this website for GhostQuest.net. I am telling you, please put in your information about these areas. Don't be afraid to comment, put your pictures. I think it's going to be great. If you're a paranormal investigation group or you know one, tell them if they've been there. Please put the information out, because this is a way. Can you imagine just having a place like, say, Gettysburg, and all of the different EVPs and the pictures and the information and their experiences all right there for somebody to check out into? It's going to be great information for investigators or historians, or, you know, just if you're interested in, you can hear all the different stories. If you have the same experience, how cool is that going to be? So I highly recommend this. Please do it. Get the word out. Follow Brian and Ghost Quest on all of his different social media. All those links will be at the bottom. Now, another big announcement. Steve and I have taken the book, We Are All Children in the Wilderness of the Afterlife, A Guided Tour Through a Haunted Life. That's my stories, and Steve coming in and commentating. That was only available on ebook. We are now releasing it as a paperback. I've got just a fantastic cover designed by Warren Designs. I have animated covers designed by Morgan. You can also find her on her YouTube channel. And some other things. Anyway, all the links are going to be at the bottom. So if you're interested, or you know authors, check these people out. They're fantastic. It's going to be great. And there are new chapters in the book. So if you had the book before, great. You're going to get new chapters. Your ebook will, eventually it's going to load up the new content and the new revised edition. And just thank you so much for sticking with. We're going to see what we can do in the future about getting you some autographed copies if you want to purchase those from me or whatever. All that's coming in the future. So this should be the second week in October, should be the launching of that. It is with 2 different editors right now, so we're trying to do the final touches on it. Everything should be good to go. And I thank you guys so much. I love each and every one of you. I missed you terrible. And we also have a new mascot. It's Harry. Harry, what do you think? Say hi to the listeners. And he has missed you all as well. So please, please, please share this